Dead or Alive 6 was developed by Team Ninja and published by Koei Techmo. It is the newest entry in the Dead or Alive series that over the years has become known for its overemphasis on gratuitous sexualization of the characters in the game, particularly the female characters. And nothing about that has really changed. And that's one of the biggest issues about Dead or Alive 6. And while my initial impressions for this game were positive, and they still are positive to a certain extent, I have to call this game for what it is, for what it really is, which is an excuse, a $60 excuse for a rip-off, money-gouging business model that Koei Techmo and Team Ninja have continued from Dead or Alive 5. And that business model is to charge people for character customization through these cheap cosmetic DLC costumes. And I'm going to talk more about that. But to start off here, when it comes to the content of Dead or Alive 6, the game retains all the basic gameplay modes that Dead or Alive 5 had, with the exception of tag team and team fight. There's no tag team in this game right now. They may update the game later and add tag team at a later date. As it stands right now, the game does not have a tag team mode. And the game doesn't have a team fight mode where you can choose up to 7 characters and engage in a series of battles, almost like a gauntlet type of arena mode where you fight against another team played by the CPU. That is also missing in this game. Outside of those 2 gameplay modes, you have your basic versus mode, you have your arcade, your survival, and your time attack modes. You have your story mode, which I'm going to talk about here shortly, and you also have your online mode, and you have something new called Dead or Alive Quest. So the basic gameplay modes of the game are good, and the game does have content, you know, with your normal versus, your time attack, your arcade, and your survival. What the game doesn't have, however, is a good story. The story mode in this game is awful. And one of the reasons it's awful is because, once again, the story in this series sucks. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. In this entry, in particular, they made it even more difficult to follow because the story is segmented on this chart or whatever. It's like a big timeline, and you unlock different pieces of the timeline at random. So you'll play one battle of the story and unlock like 5 more scenes. But because they're unlocked in the random order and they're placed on this terrible looking grid, you really don't know what events took place in what order and when. Not that it would matter anyway, even if you did, because once again, the story is not good. There's no connection that I had to any of the characters in this game. And essentially, the story mode is just a big, gigantic waste of time. In fact, it's so much of a waste of time that I lost interest in even trying to finish it. I still have yet to finish the story mode for Dead or Alive 6. That's how forgettable the story is. And that's just the story mode. I want to talk about one of the biggest critiques against this game, which is the fact that the default costumes that are unlockable in this game, you have to grind for. The game forces you to play Dead or Alive Quest, this Dead or Alive Quest mode, which is essentially a mode that's divided up into over 100 missions, or somewhere around 100 missions. You play one of these missions, and essentially you have 3 objectives for each mission. And they can range anywhere from sidestep an opponent's attack 3 times to land a certain amount of damage on your opponent. But the objectives start to overlap each other the more you play the mode, and you realize how repetitive it actually is. And the game forces you to play that if you want to unlock some of the default costumes that are in the game. Here's the problem with that. Unlocking a default costume, for example, my favorite character is Hitomi. So if I want to unlock a certain costume for Hitomi that they have in the game, I have to play Dead or Alive Quest. I have to get lucky, essentially, as to which costume my points that I've unlocked will go towards. The game randomly chooses where your points go in terms of which costume you want to unlock for a particular character. So you could end up unlocking a costume for a character that you don't care about. Or you could end up unlocking a costume for a character you do care about, but you don't care about that particular costume. And then most of the costumes themselves are just recolors of each other. There's like 3 different versions of all the default costumes, and the only difference between them is the fact that they're a different color. This is how lazy Team Ninja has gotten with these Dead or Alive games, because they know that the fan base is just stupid, full of idiots who will gladly go out and buy a $93 season pass the day the game comes out, that ironically was announced the same day that the game came out. And that's not something that was a coincidence. That's something that was premeditated and planned. You know, I've said it day one when this game was announced, and it became more clear the more they marketed this game and they revealed who was going to be in the character roster, and they revealed the deluxe edition pre-order bonus, which is a series of costumes yet again. Team Ninja's plan the entire time was to re-release Dead or Alive 5 with less content than Dead or Alive 5 had, give the players some kind of cheap excuse to continue playing this game by locking the default costumes in the game behind this redundant mode that's not really fun, this gameplay mode, this new gameplay mode. And essentially they were just going to continue their same business model that they had with Dead or Alive 5, which is to continuously release expensive ass season passes full of nothing but costumes, which, by the way, they've only announced 2 new characters are going to be in that season pass. And one of them was a DLC character from Dead or Alive 5, a guest character from the King of Fighters series. So Team Ninja and Koei Techmo know exactly what they're doing. And not only that, but all of these issues aside, you know, from the lack of gameplay modes that were available in the previous game, to glaring omissions from the character roster such as Genfu, Rachel, Momiji, characters like that, the weak story mode, which is completely forgettable and irrelevant, the repetitive Dead or Alive quest mode, and the grindy nature of having to unlock these default costumes, all of which were apathetically designed for this game. All of that aside, the biggest problem with Dead or Alive 6 is actually its online mode. As it stands currently, as I'm recording this video, there are no player lobbies in this game. There's no player match, there's no King of the Hill, there's no tournament, it's just ranked match. That's all you can play, is ranked match, which is a problem within of itself. But another problem is the fact that there's no penalty for rage quitters, of which there's plenty of those in these fighting games, and there's a lot of them in Dead or Alive 6 in particular. And not only that, but the game continuously will pit you against the player that you already fought several times over and over and over and over and over again. And I've noticed that playing online, a lot of people will play as specific characters to gain an upper edge, because that character either moves faster, their base attacks are faster than other characters on the roster, or they'll choose a character that's a grappler and they'll spam grapples throughout the match. Tina is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Or they'll choose a character that has long-range capabilities and they'll linger in the background and spam long-range attacks in order to win. There's really no competitive challenge to be had in Dead or Alive 6 because you have so many shitty people playing the game and winning matches based off of cheap exploits that they discovered in the fighting system, which now that I've played Dead or Alive 6 extensively online, I can see how weak the fighting system actually is, because it's based purely off of counters and a rock, paper, scissors type of design. And I compare that to something like Mortal Kombat or Injustice, something that really takes actual skill in order to play. And I can't help but think how casual this game really is. It has technical aspects to it, for sure, and it has more depth than people give it credit for, but it's just not a good competitive fighting game to play against other people. And then I also forgot to mention that you have to really pay for anything that you want to unlock in this game. You gotta pay for the music with in-game currency, these player points. You gotta pay for the hairstyles of the characters that are in the game. You gotta pay for a character's shades. Like if you want your character to wear sunglasses or shades, you gotta pay for that. using these player points that you earn in the game. The entire thing is just an endless grind, one that offers less content than the previous game, one that offers fewer characters than what was available in the previous game, and one that it just isn't as fun as the previous games. And this game only has 2 new characters, those being Nico and Diego. And neither of those characters really fit the Dead or Alive roster, especially Nico. That character feels like it's from a completely different intellectual property, and they're just a terrible addition, both of them, to the Dead or Alive roster. And I would have much rather them brought back Rachel and Momiji and Genfu than omit them and add in Diego and Nico. And I also missed the critical blows that they had from Dead or Alive 5, that mechanic, which is now gone and has been replaced by the break blow and the break hold, which just makes the game even more casual than it was before, because all players have to do now is literally spam one button when they achieve a full meter, and that'll just eat up a huge chunk of damage if it lands on your opponent, which is very similar to Tekken 7's Rage system. So yeah, all in all, this game was not worth $60. This game is not worth $30, half price. It really is a bargain bin game. Now that I see exactly what Team Ninja and Koei Tecmo's intent is with the Dead or Alive series going forward, I will no longer be supporting the series until they actually take it in a new direction, because this is essentially Dead or Alive 5 all over again, with once again less content, fewer characters, a fewer number of gameplay modes, and it still retains everything that was wrong about Dead or Alive 5 and the Dead or Alive series in general, leading up to this new entry. So that's my retrospective for Dead or Alive 6. It really is a disappointment, and it's not something that I'm going to spend a whole lot of time playing. I'm essentially already done with the game as it stands now, and there's really no reason for me to go back and continue playing it until maybe they update the character roster. And so far, with the additions that they have included and with the characters that they have announced, there's nothing in Dead or Alive 6 to make me want to continue putting time into it. So unfortunately, it is what it is.